Well, thank you for being here. My name is Felipe Galindo Gómez. I also sign my name as Feggo. I'm a Mexican cartoonist living now in New York. I studied painting and sculpture in Mexico, but humor and drawings were my passion. And after college, I wanted to become a political cartoonist. I was inspired by the work of a Mexican great cartoonist called Rius. Let me see if I can activate this. Yep. Okay. This cartoonist, he was very active in the late 1960s and early 70s, and he did a lot of, besides political cartoons, he did comics in which we question and inform about everything, from religion to politics to Coca-Cola, and even the Olympics, how to read Marx. So he basically inspired me. I said, I want to be a cartoonist. I want to contribute to Mexican dialogue in political cartoonists. But then he was threatened. His life was threatened by the Mexican authorities. So that was my first challenge. I said, how am I going to be a cartoonist if I'm going to put my life at risk? Fortunately, that didn't happen. And years later, I moved to the United States. I moved to New York. And my challenge there was, again, how am I going to cope with this new culture, with the language, with religion, with food, with people? And also I realized I have to start thinking also like an American, because many of the cartoons that I was doing in Mexico wouldn't make sense in the USA, and vice versa. So that was another challenge, how to make my work suitable for the American audiences. And this is what I began to do, equating a lot of what happened in America with situations in Latin America or Mexico or all over the world, criticizing the politics of the United States. Some people consider this very strong cartoon because I was talking about the American troops, but the Library of Congress asked me for this cartoon, so it was like a validation. Again, Democrats and Republicans fighting if they wanted the troops to stay or not. Now a new problem is arising in America, the racial profiling, and many policemen killing African Americans. So it's a major debate going on right now in the United States. And then I decided also to switch to another more universal language, which I find out it's done in competitions internationally, like the images that you see here at the exhibition. That's a really great challenge a lot of cartoonists do, to go from the local to the universal, that your cartoon can be read all over the world. And that's how I was able to meet George Wolinski, because he was the juror, the president of the jury in a festival in Portugal. And when I knew about his work, it was very, I knew it was very radical work and very, he will criticize everything. But for example, the works he was judging, they had nothing to do with the kind of humor he will do or they will do at Charlie Hebdo. He gave me an award for this cartoon about global warming. As you can see, it's the opposite of what he was doing. So he gave me an award. We hung out. We shared meals and drinks, and even a dinner with the Portugal president. And at the same time, he was going to have a major retrospective of his work in France. He had one there in Portugal. I noticed nothing was sacred for him. So I really admire his work. So I was familiar with what he was doing with Harakiri. And then, as Bernard mentioned, they had this problem. And the story behind this is that in the same town, there was a fire in a discotheque, and 179 people died. and the media didn't pay attention. But when Charles de Gaulle died there, it's like, oh. So that's why Harakiri did that, and they were punished by Pompidou. So immediately they came up with Charlie Hebdo in homage to Charlie de Gaulle. I mean, the Charlie was from Charlie de Gaulle, and making a pun of Charlie Mensuel, another magazine dedicated to Charlie Brown. And as you know, Charlie Hebdo was always criticizing everything, Michael Jackson, the Russian citizen now. And I think we owe a lot to this cartoonist from Charlie Hebdo. As you can see, the first cover from Harakiri and the other one, they're similar. And even in America, they follow the same pattern. This is by the New Yorker magazine. This was a major controversy in America also. In my case, for example, I was going to say that I wanted to mention that the United Nations has a Declaration of Human Rights. It's the Article 19. It reads, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. These rights include freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers." So it looks like a universal right, not only from the French people or Charlie Hebdo. Because freedom is defined as a state of being free, a liberty, rather than in confinement or physical restraint, except from external control or interference. So after the horrific assassination of our French colleagues, the main concern now is what are the challenges of the freedom of expression? What we face in this new era in which extremists respond with death and terror to silence people who exercise it. So the challenges arise many questions, and they can be on all sides of the spectrum. On one side, a cartoonist can ask himself or herself, how can I use satire to criticize the extremists' actions rather than their religion? How can I ridicule the actions of fundamentalists without attacking the religious symbols that are sacred to millions? How can is nothing sacred, including freedom of expression? And on the other side, some cartoonists might do the opposite. They can say, of course I can criticize the fundamentalists and the religion. Of course I can mock the actions of them and attack the religion symbols. For me, nothing is sacred, not even freedom of expression. But before going to these last options, more questions arise, like, is my method efficient? Am I achieving my purpose? Is my message getting across? Do I inflict collateral damage if I offend non-extremists? Do I care about all this? So for Charlie Hebdo, for example, the immediate response was to continue in the same venue. They returned to what they have been doing, have been exercising their centuries-old right of free expression, following the magazine slogan that warns you before you buy it, irresponsible journalism, like Bernard told us. So I guess it's up to the reader to buy the publication and be either amused or offended. You have that option in a free society. You don't like what you see in a magazine, don't buy it. Cancel your subscription. But not go out and kill people if you don't agree with them. Looks like the fundamentalists, these extremists, were the only people reading the magazine because they were in financial trouble. I mean, and suddenly they do that, they want to silence them, and they do the opposite. 8 million copies went from 50 or 40,000 that were printed before. I mean, try to silence an idea and you spread the opposite, the opposite effect. Freedom of expression is exercised in many countries in different ways, and by cartoonists all over the world who work in diverse circumstances. These are cartoons I have done about all these. You won't believe it. These are not published in the United States. They feel they are very touchy, so I published them in England, including this one. This is in the last issue of the Prospect magazine. Of course, we know now by Charlie Hebdo is doing that. But for example, in the USA, the freedom of expression has been in other areas. The underground comics, which is also where Charlie Hebdo was playing along with, in that kind of work, they criticize a lot American society. And like this, for example, the National Lampoon was another great publication, very close, similar to the Charlie Hebdo humor. And some political cartoons were really strong. This cartoon was also banned from one publication. He had to publish it in another one, in The Nation, finally. The New Yorker had covers that are very controversial. This was after the first attack of at the Twin Towers in the 1993. Of course, now in America, the press and the cartoonists are more cautious in regard of hurting certain sensibilities. In a country with diverse immigrant communities and minorities who were used to be viciously stereotyped up until recently, to be a bit politically correct is a new norm. Lampooning politicians is fair game, like what we see here. And there are many great cartoons examples of that. But also, some cartoonists criticize religion figures when religion interferes in the political sphere. Like this. In Latin America, cartoonists are very vociferous against politicians. Some institutions like the church, police, military, inequities of society, and corruptions. In my native Mexico, fortunately, cartoonists have not died for voicing their opinions, but the drug cartels have killed or disappeared more than 100 journalists, media workers in the past 15 years for denouncing their illicit and violent actions against the population with the complicity of corrupt authorities in many instances. France and England were the first countries to use political cartoons. This is William Hogarth. A tradition started in the early 17th century. And basically, we all cartoonists come from this tradition. France has a long history of exercising freedom of expression, perhaps in ways no other countries have done it, being Charlie Hebdo a notable example. For example, this is one of the first political cartoons in France by Philippon and Daumier. And they were put in prison. Later, the king was only fining them. And finally, they started printing their cartoons in order to pay the fines. It was really interesting. So, this is another British cartoon. So, Charlie Hebdo is a notable example of freedom of expression. Historically, political cartoons have been instrumental in questioning and commenting about our world through humor. This is the first American political cartoon done by, it was done by Benjamin Franklin about the colonies trying to gain independence from England. So, nothing and nobody has escaped from being touched by cartoonists. Kings, queens, politicians, religions, and authorities, machismo, capitalism, socialism, communism, fundamentalism, all the isms and ills of society. So apparently we are the canaries in the mine. And that's what many people fear, that someone will make people think. A curious note is that the initial of freedom of expression, at least in English, are spelled foe or enemy, which is what it is for some governments, some societies, and some religious fundamentalists. There was a huge response from cartoonists worldwide in solidarity to our fallen colleagues, and most of the works were either an homage to them or ridiculed the terrorists. From what I saw, most cartoonists respected Islam. Was this a measured response or fear? I believe everybody acted according to his or her personal concept of freedom of expression. I think the challenge now is that the bar has been set higher for us cartoonists in the way we will express our points of view and our feelings. I'm confident we will rise to the occasion with powerful images that will continue to question and comment, like the ones we have at the exhibition. I think that is our contribution to society, and I like to believe our duty. And I also urge the whole world to rise to the challenge to uphold the United Nations mandate of freedom of expression. Thank you.